these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and the 2 other disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I am going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." They went out, got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, have you no fish?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some there." So they cast it. And now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. The disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord. He put on some clothes, for he was naked, and jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from land, only about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Peter said to Jesus, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time, Jesus said to Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter said to Jesus, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." Jesus said to Peter the 3rd time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he had said to him the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" And Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hand, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. After this, Jesus said to Peter, "Follow me." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks. It kind of appears to me in this passage that the disciples, frankly, are at a loss as what to do next. They've learned to overcome the fear that locked them behind closed and locked doors. They've begun to open their heart to the ways in which God is showing them to love and serve other people, but now they're not so sure. They've lived through the horror of Good Friday and the fear of the empty tomb, and yet each one of them in their own way have come to grips to what it might mean to follow the risen Jesus. So far, the instructions aren't very detailed. They were sort of limited to, you get to forgive sins and to be at peace in the midst of difficult times. That's all they've been given on what they ought to do next. But beyond this, they're not sure what everyday discipleship looks like. What does it mean to follow a Jesus who's not physically present with them every single day? So, When faced with the uncertainty, the disciples then do what disciples have been doing in all times whenever we have faced difficult times. When we're not sure what to do, we do what we've always done. We just do it faster and with more intensity. Right? We know that busyness will set us free. Or at least it will help us ignore the anxiety that comes with living in uncertain times. And so for Peter, that answer was fishing. You throw something out, and everyone goes, okay, let's do that. Peter's well respected. So no one bothers to ask Peter the important question, which is, do you think this is really what Jesus would have us do? And as a result of that question not being asked, they spend all night working really hard. And nothing happens. They've got nothing to show for all of their hard work. And I'm sure they worked hard. These were fishermen who knew what it was like to put in an all-night work. And yet what we find in this passage that nothing happens until the disciples are willing to follow Jesus, but they don't even know it's Jesus that they're following. They don't know for sure in that moment when that person on the beach says to them, children, throw your net on the right side. Now there had to be someone on that boat who thought, yeah, we've done that already, but what can it hurt? He does not identify himself from the beach. It is only after they have this huge haul of fish that even one of the disciples is able to figure out what's going on. In some ways, in the life of faith, we only really know if we were being led when we look back. Some of our best laid plans, some of our best projects turn out to be a dismal failure. And looking back going, oh, maybe we didn't listen as clearly as we thought to the leadings of God. The good news is God will not leave us fully alone. But they didn't even ask the question, so sometimes that's what gets us into trouble. The sky does not part for the disciples. There's no voice from the heavens saying, this is what you need to do, I am God. And that is what the life of a follower of the risen Christ is all about. We do not get the split skies. We do not get the voice. We do not get the signs that are so clear we can deny them. We sometimes are unsure. We never hear fully. This is exactly what fruitful ministry will be for you. In some ways, I wonder if the disciples on that boat were willing to listen to the voice of that stranger out of desperation. Throw enough stuff against the wall and eventually it will stick, and then we'll know what it means to follow Jesus faithfully. It is so finally in the action of throwing the net that they receive confirmation that this is in fact Jesus. Now, ancient interpreters, the early church fathers and mothers, used to turn this passage into sort of the archetypes of faith. Peter and John represented different types. Now, that's not something I normally do, but I actually find it instructive here. So, John, who is just labeled the one whom Jesus loved, John and Peter are examples, when taken together, what the fullness of faith looks like. In other words, how do we work to follow the risen Jesus most faithfully? Well, no one recognizes that it is Jesus on the beach, but once the fish start rolling in, John understands. John sees what this huge haul of fish is all about. It's not just because they happen to catch the right school at the right time. He recognizes something in this because he has paid close attention to the stories of faith, to the time with Jesus, so that he's attuned to know, oh, this is what's happening. And so he bothers to tell Peter. But Peter does not understand, and John does not act. All John says is, oh, that's Jesus. It's Peter who, hearing that, then moves to action. In other words, what they have said in the past is that this passage is about true faith being about understanding and action. That those two must go together for faithfulness. The fullness of being a follower of Jesus demands both of all of us, seeking understanding and moving to act. Without action, understanding is meaningless. And action without understanding is just busyness. And nobody really likes busy work, even if it does assuage our anxiety. Jesus does not leave the disciples with a half understanding of faith. In this instance, Jesus is going to make it abundantly clear what he is trying to teach them because he's about to leave again. When the disciples come to shore, the first thing that happens is Jesus feeds them. Until their basic needs are met, well, until our basic needs are met, we can have a difficult time learning and understanding anything. In our house, we call it hangry. The disciples have been up all night long. Until this last moment, there was no fish. You can imagine they were frustrated, uncertain, and pretty hungry. Add all those things together and you get somebody who is grumpy because they're hungry. Hence, hangry. So they come ashore and fish and bread are waiting for them, which should remind us that this is no simple meal. The meal is a lesson unto itself, fish and bread, which is what I told the children during the time for children. As they eat, I wonder if the disciples remember and hear back about chapter 6 in the Gospel of John. This is where they didn't have anything. They couldn't believe in those moments that God would provide food for 5,000 people, and they say, well, this kid has fish and bread. So anytime fish and bread show up, this is about feeding and about teaching God's abundance. In that passage, Jesus provides the needs for everyone and then teaches an important lesson about trust and building community and sharing what we have. Jesus does this because of a simple gift from a boy. And immediately, following that encounter, Jesus then calls himself the manna from heaven. It's as if Jesus is making sure that people understand that there is abundance, just not in the way that we often expect. The manna story, as you might remember in Exodus 16. The people are hungry and grumbling, probably the first example of biblical hangriness. And God says, I'm going to rain down bread from heaven. But it's not bread that they're used to, so they don't know what it is, so they call it, what is it? Which is manna. Literally means, what is it? And they have to be told to eat it because they're so unsure about the fact that this stuff is actually good for us or from God or is abundance that they don't even know that they can eat it. Again, a story about reminding of abundance. Jesus knows that when the disciples forget these lessons of manna or fish and bread, that what will happen is that our call to serve and to love and to share God's abundance will always return to busyness wrapped in religious trappings. If the disciples misunderstand the work that they will be called to in this, what they will instead do is go back to that moment and try to recreate that example, that exact time when the fish were abundant, instead of going out and doing what Jesus said, which is feed other people. And when that doesn't work, they'll try even harder. They'll have to work to remember. Now, exactly what time of sunrise was it? The right side of the boat. Was the boat exactly in the direction that it was when we saw Jesus on the shore? And they got to make sure that Peter's naked because somehow that's important to the story. I wish I knew. I don't. So instead of feeding sheep, they'll argue over the details of that original situation to relive the glory of the past 153 fish. And that's why Jesus feeds them and teaches them and makes it abundantly clear. But he does this by turning to Peter and using Peter as the theme. He asked the same question over and over again. Do you love me? 3 times. It has been said that this is in some ways a parallel to the 3 times Peter denied Jesus in the garden. And each one of these questions is more than just about checking in with Peter, do you really love me? It's about teaching Peter what he needs to be about. Instead of leading the disciples on fishing missions, he needs to stop and remember following Jesus is about feeding and caring for others. And not just in the physical sense, but certainly in the physical sense as well. Peter then learns this important lesson that following Jesus often means that we will end up going to places we did not wish to go. Peter's reminded that following Jesus is not your path to your best life now. It is not the automatic path to security. But Peter also learns in front of all the other disciples a simple lesson. We are fed when we follow Jesus in ways that are often unexpected. We will be recipients of abundance that we did not create. And we better not hoard it just for ourselves. Manna, fish and bread, communities, friendship, meaning, all these things will come when we follow Jesus, just not in the way that we always had hoped. But it does not end there. It is just the beginning. All of it is already provided for us so that we can feed others, so that we can serve others, so that we can use all that we have to learn to be in relationship with people we've never known for God's glory. We receive so that we can give. It really is that simple. And it's a lesson that has to be taught over and over and over again. Because it's not easy. Because we will forget. We will turn inward upon ourselves. And we will ignore these stories. But the truth is that following Jesus is about doing just this. Anything else that does not fall into this isn't following Jesus. And as I said, the good news is we will never learn this lesson fully. We have to hear it again and again. And this is what God's grace is about. Reminding us that we do not have to figure it all out. We have to continue to listen to the stories of our faith. For those who have come before us, who we often like to pick on, notice that I really wasn't picking on Peter. We like to pick on him, but the good news is Peter's us. We all have our moments in our lives where we have hauled in 153 fish, where we have said, God is clearly in the midst of this. And we have all had moments in our lives where we have said, instead of sitting with that question a little longer, we got ourselves busy. So we didn't have to wrestle with it. So my hope and invitation is that in the places of our anxiety, individually and collectively, that we take some time to sit and to ask that question, is what we're doing really what Jesus wants us to do? Knowing that we may not get a clear answer. And then, let us act upon our best discernment, trusting that God will take even our smallest actions and multiply them in ways that